Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. The VA is ending it, and I am curious to see the repercussions that are going to unfold for us as the veteran community that utilizes the VA. Now, I don't know. I'm a little bit torn because there's the leadership aspect of it, which makes sense because of all the other issues that can happen. But from the veteran kind of perspective, I'm curious to see what's going to happen here and what the VA's rationale is and if it actually makes sense, because sometimes, guess what? The VA's rationale doesn't make sense. Sometimes. Anyway, so with that, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. The two asks are really, look, hit the thumbs up and watch the video. Those two things help to push this into the hands of all the others out there. If we're informed, we can be dangerous. When we're not informed, we're just, bouncing around. It doesn't make any sense. All right. If you want to support the channel in other ways, please consider being a member. You can do that by going to the homepage. You'll see the highlighted members there and a join button. Thank you to all you members. I appreciate each and every one of you. Definitely not mandatory. It's a great way to support the channel, and I appreciate you guys. All right. So jumping into this. The headline is VA ends mandatory overtime for most employees processing benefit claims. So if you thought your claim was taking long, it's going to take longer. If you're getting ready to file a claim and you heard how long it's taking, guess what? It's going to probably take longer because if you're not hiring enough people, and on top of that, you're taking away the overtime aspect for processing of these claims, things are going to take longer. Anyway, let's jump into it. There's a subheadline, VBA. Now, for those that don't know, VA's three-headed monster. You have cemeteries, the Healthcare, and Benefits Administration. Those are your three. So VBA, the Veterans Benefits Administration, has delivered record-breaking level of benefits to veterans for the past 3 years and is on track to break yet another record this year. The Department of Veterans Affairs is ending mandatory overtime for most employees who process benefit claims. The Veterans Benefits Administration is shifting to a system of mostly voluntary overtime, where employees can work for a maximum of 20 hours of overtime each month. VA Undersecretary for Benefits Joshua Jacobs told reporters VBA has relied on mandatory overtime for the past 7 years to keep up with its increasing workload. We're producing and delivering veteran benefits at a high level. But as I've said before, I have never thought that mandatory overtime is a sustainable operating practice, Jacobs told reporters in a call on Tuesday. And from a leadership perspective, I completely agree. That is a very important thing. Understanding that pushing mandatory overtime creates burnout, all kinds of things. Then you get more attrition and then more overtime because you have even less people because people are quitting to find other jobs and so forth. So let's move on in this, see what else they say here. VBA, Veterans Benefits Administration, has delivered record-breaking level of benefits to veterans for the past 3 years and is on track to break yet another record by the end of this fiscal year. The agency processed 1.98 million disability benefits claims for veterans and their survivors. Important little side note, VA also gives monetary benefits to surviving spouses, okay, under dependency indemnity compensation as well as the VA pension for survivors. All right, moving on. That's for the fiscal year of 2023, a nearly 16% increase from the year prior. VBA issued $163 billion with a B dollars in total benefits in fiscal year 2023. VBA is seeing higher volume of claims because of the PACT Act of 2022, that law that expanded VA healthcare and benefits eligibility for veterans exposed to toxic substances during their military service. Now, primarily, it's focused on burn pit stuff, but they did sprinkle in a couple other things for others. I think 2 conditions for Vietnam, Agent Orange stuff, and some stuff for the contaminated water. VBA has granted more than 1 million benefits claims under the PACT Act. Jacobs said VBA is on pace to process 30% more claims in fiscal 2024 compared to last year. The agency so far this year has awarded $112 billion, again with a B, dollars to veterans and their survivors in compensation and benefits. So it gets a little bit deceiving the way that they do all this. The $112 billion is not new benefits awarded, even though they were just talking about that they're on pace to process 30% more claims in fiscal 2024. And then it goes on to say, so far this year, they have awarded $112 billion. That's everybody, right? You got your claim. You've been 100%, for example, for the last 15 years. Your numbers count in that $112 billion. So just so people are aware that that's the culmination of all the payouts this fiscal year. So, moving on. VBA currently has a claims backlog of about 277,000 claims, nearly 30% of its total inventory of claims. VBA is also growing its workforce to keep up with the demand. Since October 2022, VBA has grown its workforce by nearly 33% to more than 34,000 employees. Now, here's a weird piece. I'm going to throw this in there. We have talked about the $10,000 employee reduction that the VA is also doing through attrition as their means of reducing their employee count. That is focused on the VHA, the Veterans Healthcare Administration. But the funny thing is that if you're increasing the amount of claims that you're processing, and a lot of these may be new veterans into the VA network, all of a sudden you have a bunch new enrolled VA eligible veterans who are going to be shifting over to VHA for healthcare. But in the meantime, you're reducing the workers at the VHA, even though you got this big tidal wave coming in of claims. I mean, they're talking about these numbers, 30% more. There's a backlog. We're pushing out as many as we can. We're upping our numbers on VBA. We've increased our worker, head count by nearly 33% to 34,000. And, all this talk about this massive push of benefits coming in. What's going to happen when they hit the healthcare side? We're having this 10,000 worker reduction, primarily through attrition, people who quit, retire, whatever. They just don't fill those positions. So I don't know. I'm really optimistic, as you could tell, on what's going to happen there. Moving on, there's a quotation. Our growing workforce has gone above and beyond to deliver these earned benefits, and we remain focused on achieving our primary mission, which is delivering timely, high-quality, and equitable decisions for veterans and their survivors with a world-class customer experience, Jacobs said. At the same time, we're laser-focused on ensuring that our workforce can achieve these outcomes sustainably in the long term. Jacobs said VBA ended mandatory overtime based on feedback from VBA employees and his own personal concern about the ability of our workforce to sustainably deliver benefits at the scale that we have been doing for a very long time. Goes on, my goal is to leave this organization better than I found it, and I was concerned that a continuation of mandatory overtime perpetually would be very problematic for our ability to continue delivering at the levels we have been, he said. Jacobs said VBA plans to keep growing its workforce until it reaches 36,000 employees, but added that the agency's constantly evaluating our numbers. So, one, good that they're still trying to increase the number of workers on the VBA side. Awesome. Good that they've eliminated the mandatory overtime. I love the fact that they're still allowing overtime from a volunteer basis, because there are plenty of folks out there that are like, hey, I'll get time and a half or whatever it is and rake in that money while I can. So good for them for doing that and allowing that to continue with the push for getting the benefits out as, I don't know, we'll call it as timely as they can. Moving on, we are very focused on evaluating incoming receipts, the total production, and then making sure we revalidate that our assumptions and our goals remain accurate, he said. The Veterans Health Administration is becoming more selective with its hiring. Funny that they shifted into this. After it saw record workforce growth last year, the agency is also seeing higher workforce retention, which is hard to eliminate 10,000 jobs if you're retaining everybody. VA is also looking to shed about 10,000 jobs in its fiscal 2025 budget request. Most of those job cuts would come from the VHA, the Veterans Healthcare Administration, like I mentioned earlier. VA expects to achieve the reduced headcount through attrition. But then the paragraph before it said that they're seeing higher workforce retention, so go figure. Jacobs, however, said VBA has the funding it needs to continue workforce growth. We are fine from a discretionary perspective. We have the funds that we need to deliver the historic level of benefits that we have been delivering, he said. Jacobs said VBA is also seeing higher retention rates for its employees compared to 6-year average retention rate. He added that the VBA continues to hire employees. Employees have had opportunities to advance into higher positions. As we've increased hiring, that hiring has both come from employees outside VBA, but also employees within VBA, Jacobs said. As we've provided more opportunities, more employees have chosen to stay, in addition to the mission. So VBA will keep mandatory overtime in place for some employees. That includes workers who process claims for MST, that would be your military sexual trauma, radiation exposure, and Camp Lejeune contaminated water and pensions. So individuals that are working those types of claims will continue to have mandatory overtime requirements. If you're not in one of those buckets, then the workers have the option from a voluntary basis. We have a workload that requires more timely decisions, and so we want to focus on continuing to bring that work, the total inventory down to improve that timeliness, Jacobs said. Moving on, as we're training those new employees, we're going to continue the mandatory overtime. He added, we will assess what? We will assess as we watch our work in those areas progress. If and when we can make changes to that policy and transition them to voluntary overtime. But right now, our assessment is that we need to maintain that policy to continue making improvements for our veterans who have filed those claims. VBA held National Quality Stand Down and Wellness Day last month with a focus on addressing burnout and mental health of its workforce, as well as improving overall work quality. Jacobs said the agency is also rethinking training for its new employees and refresher courses for existing staff. Investing in our employees matters and can ultimately yield significant returns for our veterans and survivors because we know what's good for our employees is good for those we serve. This stand down was a necessary part of our effort to improve the accuracy of our claims decision and support our employees, but it's certainly not going to stop there, he said. VBA expects its employees to work in the office at least 5 days per 2-week period, adhering to VA-wide policy and the Biden administration's goal of bringing federal employees back to the office at least 50% of the time. And that concludes it. Just wanted to bring you into the loop on what's going on at the VBA with regard to staffing, and we might see a little slower decisions as they're still trying to hire more folks. They removed the mandatory overtime for a lot of claims. Some of the more specialized claims, they still have mandatory overtime in place. So with that, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.